everybody. I'm Richard Carroll, founder and chairman of the Creative Defense Foundation. Today, I have the pleasure of a conversation with Paul Lemmo, Vice President and General Manager of Lockheed Martin's Sensors, Effectors and Mission Systems division. This division produces billions in revenue for Lockheed Martin. But before we jump in, just a quick note for the listeners about the Creative Defense Foundation. CDF brings together leaders from the Department of Defense, Congress, and the innovation community to focus on one central question. How do we adapt national security to keep pace with rapidly evolving threats? We work at the intersection of policy, operational need, and emerging capability. And when we talk about the innovation community, we think about it in two parts. Entrepreneurs building from the outside and entrepreneurs driving change from within organizations such as Lockheed Martin. Both are essential. It's actually so central to how we think that we open each of our conferences with two AI-driven video characters, Entre for entrepreneurial and Intra for entrepreneurial, representing those two forces. It's a simple idea, but it reflects a serious point. Innovation and national security now depends on both working together. Okay, now that I have that out of the way, let's talk about how Lockheed Martin, the largest defense contractor in the world, thinks about that. Paul, can you give us some background on sensors, effectors, and mission systems?
Yeah, first, Rich, thanks for having me on. It's exciting to join your podcast here. This is a relatively new organization in that it's a compilation of capabilities across our rotary and mission systems portfolio that brings together a lot of different hardware and production programs, everything from radar, electronic warfare, acoustic sensors, to mission systems that we do for aircraft, such as helicopters, fixed-wing aircraft, etc. Let's see, our launchers portfolio that includes the Mark 41 we do for the Navy, laser weapon systems, counter UAS systems, and also some of our unmanned autonomous systems, both for the maritime surface Navy as well as the Undersea Navy. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about those since that's a big foray for us into autonomy.
Paul, can you tell us how much revenue does your division derive for Lockheed Martin?
Yeah, we're over $5 billion in revenue on an annual basis.
Okay. There are two major shifts underway right now in defense: autonomy and how the department is choosing to buy and scale it. And they're becoming increasingly interdependent. We're seeing venture-backed companies funding and advancing autonomy with their own capital, effectively driving private R&D at scale. How does that play into your business portfolio?
Well, it definitely is a little bit of a different business model than we operate with as a public company. But I think where it's converging is that we certainly recognize a need to do more investment upfront into products before we bring them to customers. You know, years ago, you would respond to a request for proposal and most of the development would be paid for by the customer. That's really changed in recent years, I'd say in the last 5 years, to where more and more every year we're developing products on our own, getting them to some minimum viable product that we can bring and demonstrate to customers. And so in that way, we're sort of matching up with some of the private equity companies that are raising private capital and doing that on their own. And I think the convergence becomes even clearer when, those private companies start to become public and they're, abiding by the same shareholder values and shareholder interests that we have as a public company with regard to how we spend our free cash, whether it's on investment or profit or buying back stock, et cetera. That's always a balance for public companies that perhaps private companies don't have. But as they go through their life cycle, they'll and become public eventually, as most of them do, they'll be dealing with those same kinds of pressures, if you will, from shareholders.
I see. So one of the things I hear a lot about is the Last Supper, how the consolidation at the end of the Cold War created these supersized defense contractors and how they've adopted a cost-plus model in their businesses and how that model has maybe failed us. Do you think that model has been a failure?
I don't. I think that the industry understands how to do fixed price work, and when the customer asks for that, we respond. It is a different risk model, whether it's fixed price or cost plus. And so, I would argue that industry, if nothing else is true, industry reflects our customer. So when our customer issues a contract that's cost plus, it's not that industry is not efficient. We are, but we're probably geared towards designing the best piece of equipment that we can design as the first priority under cost plus, because typically the requirements are as such and the customer demands that capability. Under fixed price, it's a different set of risk models, and you're more geared towards balancing both the capability and the cost and ensuring that you're obviously bringing it in under that fixed cost.
When the DoD wants to buy a really expensive big platform like F-35, or a submarine or a submarine combat system, I don't know how they can expect private industry to fund the R&D of that. So it seems to me like that model will continue, at least for large platforms.
No, I agree. And Rich, let me go back and comment a little more on that prior question. I think that having a cost plus model allows the government to continue to evolve the concept and the requirements as they go on. I know we like to say that doesn't happen, but it does. A lot of times, the initial thought process of what the government wants to buy does evolve after that initial proposal. And if you're under a fixed price contract, there's a lot of contractual action that happens between the contractor and the government that slows things down, because the contractor is obviously not going to accept any change without getting an equitable adjustment. Whereas on a cost plus, the same thing happens, but because it's cost plus, it just moves a lot quicker than that. And there's maybe not as much claim back and forth about whose responsibility the change was. So I just wanted to add that as to why there are advantages at times to go with cost plus, perhaps when your requirements aren't 100% firm and you're not exactly sure of the end product that you want to buy. In terms of development on our own nickel as industry, yeah, look, I think some of these very large, expensive platforms are going to be very difficult to make a business case to do all the development in industry. Now, can we spend hundreds of millions and develop a min-viable prototype and go fly something? Sure, I think we can do that. Lockheed Martin is doing that with our Vectis platform from Arrow, which is basically a CCA competitor for the next increment. We're doing that with some of our undersea unmanned vehicles and some of the surface unmanned vehicles as well. But I think they're going to be developed to probably min-viable product so we can get some feedback from customers. And at some point, I think there has to be a transition to some funding from customers to carry that into production.
It's about innovation. I know the critics of cost plus contracts are that if you spend your own money, you're going to be more efficient and you're going to be more innovative. And it seems to me like that works well when it can be applied to products that, say, are more dual use products, especially not for products where the risk in the R&D is billions and billions of dollars and the production is going to be just a few products. I don't see how that conversion works. I know the DoD wants to give it a try. It'll be interesting to see where they end up with a mix of investor R&D and government R&D. Is that
It will be
how you
interesting.
see it? Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, listen, industry always has to make a business case, whether you're a private firm or a public firm. Maybe a little bit of a different business case in either one of those, but you have to be able to make a business case. And that just means there has to be follow-on revenue enough to make up for the initial investment. And if it's not there and they're only going to buy a few, that's where it falls apart. And I think one of the things that I like about what this current administration is doing in the Department of War, and you see it in some of these munitions agreements, is that there are benefits and risks, if you will, on both sides of the fence for the government and for industry. So, for example, they would like us to put in all the capital to build the factories to scale up munitions production. We're willing to do that, but now they're also having to guarantee us a 7-year, multi-year contract. And if they don't come through with that, there are hooks in there that we can get repaid for some of that investment. Because again, you can run the numbers. These are sometimes simple business cases that have to be made. No company is going to operate at a loss position, for a length of time. It just doesn't work like that.
What you just described in working out a new business model with the DoD, where you are investing and they are guaranteeing and they are working with you to, I guess, drive more risk to you in the hopes that they get more innovation and efficiency. It'll be interesting to see how that evolves. I think the Creative Defense Foundation is very interested in the new business models. And in our upcoming conference in Minnesota in September, we're going to cover some of those things, and we'll be looking for where the government has engaged industry and where they can talk about how they're architecting these new business models in an attempt to get innovation, efficiency, and an expanding industrial base. Talking about investing, though, you recently put $50 million to a sail drone that was announced in 2025. Can you comment on that for a minute?
Yeah, sure. So as we think about both unmanned surface and unmanned undersea vehicles, our objective is to develop and provide a common set of autonomy software and also mission packages, or mission payloads, I should say, that are extensible across any platform. So in the surface vehicle world, we're not necessarily going to be a platform provider. On the undersea side, we have a heritage of doing that, and so we will likely be a platform provider there. But our focus, first and foremost, is a set of open architecture capabilities, payload capabilities that can be extensible across a number of platforms. On the surface side, what we saw with Sail Drone was a good platform to go demonstrate just that we could integrate some of our autonomy capability with theirs, and that we could bring payloads, meaningful payloads, to demonstrate to the Navy what USVs can bring to them. Now, do we think that the Navy is going to single up and buy only sail drone platforms? No, probably not. But we believe it's a very good platform and one that can fill some roles. It's got, I think, over 2 million hours of operation out there. There are various platforms that they offer, and they've been in operation for many years with the U.S. Navy and some international partners as well, all around the world, doing surveillance missions, both mapping sea bottom and also doing surface ISR with EOIR cameras and things like that, and communication capabilities on the platform. So we think it's a good platform. It's got long endurance and one that we're going to be adding some capabilities to over the next year or two to demonstrate to the Navy. And just to go a little bit deeper on the autonomy side, when I talk about autonomy, it's really two things. One is the actual platform autonomy, and that's certainly an area where we can bring capability, and we will, but we're going to integrate with the host platform's capability as well. But then the other part of autonomy is, how do we operate multiple autonomous systems from a host ship, whether that's a surface vehicle, a submarine, an aircraft. And Lockheed Martin at large has spent a lot of time and effort thinking about that. How do we control multiple vehicles and have them do a coordinated mission, a swarm, or whatever the case may be? So when I talk about autonomy, I'm really talking about both cases, both the platform specific and sort of the multi-platform coordination.
That example you just described, that was discussed on a panel at our last conference, where we had a number of the Navy officials there talking about the need for exactly what you just described in the maritime scenario. It's also, required in all other autonomous scenarios.
It is.
And it sounds to me like your sail drone investment was really a strategic investment to merge capabilities more than it was a look at just your return on investment for sail drone.
It is. And that's really just one example of if you look across Lockheed Martin, where we are either investing in or partnering up with a lot of new non-traditional companies that are bringing some innovative technology. And I think that the synergy that we're finding across a lot of these endeavors is they're bringing a great new technology or capability. We have a broader vision of maybe how that fits with the service. We bring a lot of the domain expertise of the larger domain now, the warfighting domain, and also the system engineering and integration capabilities to kind of take that capability and integrate it into the next higher platform or overall theater capability. And that's what some of these companies don't have, but they're experts in the technology they're bringing. And so it's a good marriage because we're not trying to go build the sail drone, right? That's their capability, their technology. We want to use that. We want to leverage that and help them in the market space. The other thing I think we bring with some of these companies is expertise on maybe how to scale up. If we're successful together and we get contracts and they need to build tens or hundreds of these, we can help with that in terms of some expertise on how to scale up.
One of the things I know the Department of Defense budget is increasing substantially. And with latest budget that was just submitted by President Trump, $1.5 trillion, a massive increase. I noticed in that budget, there was a component of it that went from 1 billion to 58 billion, which was their autonomy efforts. It looks to me like they're almost creating a new command for autonomy. Do you see that coming?
I read an article on that, and I'm wondering that myself. Other than that article, I haven't really heard or seen any other indication of that. So I'll be watching that space as you and many others will to see, hey, where that budget's going to go and whether or not a new command gets stood up.
Well, it's certainly the talk around town, autonomy. We're clearly moving into a new model where autonomy integration, new business approaches are all coming together. And it's going to shape the phase of the defense industrial base. This has been a really valuable conversation. I appreciate it. And I appreciate your thinking about it and joining me. And for our listeners, these are exactly the kind of conversations we're looking to advance at the Creative Defense Foundation. So, Paul, thanks again. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Rich.